Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist Patrick Cornelius. We talked to him at length in May 2020 about this COVID-19 world and his latest 2019 CD, This Should Be Fun. After 18 years in New York City, he has cultivated a substantial body of work as a composer and bandleader and performed his original music in some of the world's top jazz venues. He's got serious jazz chops and great stories. Enjoy.
I figure it's good to probably talk about mice and music right now.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But, hey, thanks for taking a minute out. I appreciate it. And I guess the title of your CD from last year, This Should Be Fun, is probably more poignant now than anything else.
Oh, gosh.
Man. So my question to you is this. You have a relatively new album out that people have the latitude to listen to now, but you can't back it up with any live shows. What does that feel like, that kind of bittersweet thing?
Well, I mean, it's very rough because, I mean, well, but you know, frankly, that album actually came out last year, and I did some touring at the time and a lot of gigs here in New York. So I do feel like I got some mileage out of it, but, you know, I did have gigs that I was going to do. I did have tours and festivals that I was going to do this spring. And in fact, there was one that in March, right, as all this stuff was happening, you know, they were assuring me it was still on up until the day I left, and then I flew to Salt Lake City, and I got there, and the guy who picked me up from the airport said, "It's canceled. You got to go right back."
Wow.
So that's been it's been frustrating. However, you know, I did get to promote that CD a little bit already, and I really feel bad for artists now who have releases right now who literally are just like dropping them on Facebook live chats or Instagram live chats. And, you know, really, what are they going to do? How are they going to move these copies? You know, people are just literally have no option other than to stream them. And where does the revenue come? I actually do have a new project coming out in the fall, and, you know, there was a big European tour planned, and now I'm just assuming, even though people haven't told me for sure that things are canceled, I can't imagine that anything is going to go forward. Because everything I'm reading now is like there's going to be a second wave virus in the fall. And, you know, I don't know what European country is going to want somebody from America to be coming into their countries at this point, considering we seem to have the worst go of it so far.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've heard that sentiment quite a bit. I think it's staggering. I always wonder how good jazz is doing and ask musicians, and it took the coronavirus for me to understand the amount of shows that just one musician, let alone one region of musicians, is canceling is staggering.
Oh yeah, it's insane, and you know, and we're sort of at the small end of the spectrum. I mean, I have friends who tour with like major pop acts, and they're canceling waves and waves of concerts. And just beyond the musicians, just think of all the food up and down the food chain of people who depend on those shows for their livelihood, from stagehands to lighting experts, people who run concessions at the venues. I mean, this is just I read a really disheartening article in Rolling Stone about how, or was it Rolling Stone? I can't recall. Maybe it was Rolling Stone a few days ago about how everybody expects the live music industry to be the last industry that gets back on its feet after all this is over.
Oh man!
And, it seems like a sobering reality, but it makes sense. I mean, who's going to want to jam into the vanguard, you know, until people are confident that there's a vaccine and they're not going to get deathly ill?
I agree. Yeah. Wow.
Sorry, we went down into the doldrums pretty quickly here.
No, we need to, and that's why I'm doing this, honestly, Patrick. I mean, it's like, you know, jazz musicians are to me, are some of the finest specimens of human on the planet, and you all are so raw and open, and just you're in it for the right reasons. You know, jazz musicians are not in this for the money, so there's a level of raw that I want to capture during this period, because we've never gone through this, and hopefully, God willing, we never go through this again. I think it's really good to capture all of these, and I think there's going to be a breadth of emotions that go through this, from the reality to the hope, and somewhere in the gray matter, we got to find a way to survive this. So we can't ignore the reality, but we also have the choice to grab onto hope. So that's the key.
Right.
But
true.
At any rate, are you a native New Yorker?
No, actually no. Although I have lived here for the past 19 years. So I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else, but I don't feel as if I want to claim myself as a New Yorker. My father was in the Air Force, and I was born in Germany and then raised between Texas and Georgia, and I spent some years in England too. But I guess I consider myself somewhat Texan because I went to middle school and high school in San Antonio, Texas. And I feel like those are formative years in someone's personality. And I don't know, I sort of am clinging on to some kind of Southern identity, I guess, still.
Yeah, well, how did those jazz seeds get sprinkled in you?
Oh, well, this is a story I'm happy to tell. San Antonio actually has had a pretty decent jazz scene. I mean, not even just pretty decent, but really great considering, its size relative to other cities. I mean, granted, it is like, what is it, like the fifth or sixth largest city in America, but when you're talking about jazz scenes, usually people think of New York first, and then they think of LA and San Francisco and Chicago. New Orleans, obviously, is maybe number two behind New York, but people don't often think of cities like San Antonio, but there are an incredible number of musicians there who kind of split their time between the scene of Austin and San Antonio. And also, a big component of it is in Texas education. Band is a huge thing. Band and orchestra and the arts in general. There's a huge arts culture in the Texas schools, particularly band, because I think it goes hand in hand with football, which is ginormous in Texas high school football.
Yeah.
So the high school I went to had a rather legendary jazz program for a public school in the state of Texas. And, when I was in 8th grade, I heard the high school jazz band that I was to attend after that year play, and it just knocked me out that people who are not that much older than me were, like, playing jazz and improvising, and it was something I really wanted to do badly. And so that just inspired me, and I had a number of really great teachers in San Antonio and great mentors, and they really helped me, and that sort of got me along the path. And I had wonderful parents who really supported my, the addiction, the musical addiction.
So, what was the first live jazz show that you saw that really, really got you motivated?
Well, of course, these things happen in stages, right? So, in San Antonio, the jazz musician that everybody knew was Jim Cullum, who was this New Orleans early jazz improviser, trumpet player. He had a weekly NPR syndicated show called Live at the Riverwalk, or Riverwalk Live at the Landing, I think. And he would have guests like Dick Hyman and Nicholas Payton and all sorts of other great artists who would come and sit in and play, primarily trad jazz. And so I went to see them when I was in 8th grade, and that was great because that was my first experience in an actual jazz club. And then as far as like sort of a big time New York artist that I heard, I guess that would be in 9th grade. I played at the high school jazz band played at this jazz festival in San Antonio called the St. Mary's Fiesta Festival, which oddly enough I was supposed to go back and headline myself last month, but obviously it was canceled, which is rather sad. Anyway, I heard George Garzone play there, and it really sort of knocked me out. And George is actually also one of the reasons why I chose to go to Berkeley for my undergraduate, because I wanted to study with him. And then the next year I heard Dick Oates play at another high school jazz festival that my band competed in, and he was amazing. I also would go on to study with him. It made a big impression on me. But I think the culmination for me was hearing Kenny Garrett play with the Songbook Band with Kenny Kirkland and Jeff Tain Watts and Nat Reeves once again at the St. Mary's Fiesta Festival. I mean, that was huge for me because by that time I was a senior in high school and getting ready to go to Berkeley to start like my musical education, you know, in a larger sense, and getting to hear, you know, Kenny. Man, that was amazing. So I guess you would have to say that the biggest impact on me was Kenny Garrett when I was in high school.
So, you know, we're in this, you know, period of no live jazz, and I want to know what, and even being in quarantine, what memories from live shows or legends and luminaries that you've been around are you really holding on to that's keeping you positive and keeping your chin up?
You know, I'm going to have to be completely honest, and like since we've been in this quarantine situation, my attention just tends to be like 70% making sure my kids are doing okay, and about 25% making sure that I'm handling my teaching load, and then the other 5% falls upon sort of self-reflection and musical pursuits.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I have thought back that many times, although I have, you know, we've lost some great legends, and you know, the passing of Ellis Marsalis was I guess affected me because back in January I was in New Orleans for the Jazz Education Network conference, and I heard what was to be one of his last performances ever at Snug Harbor with Jason Stewart and Jason Marsalis, and that was just such a beautiful night. So I think if I've thought about anything at all since we've been through this, it probably would be that night back in January that I heard Ellis playing.
Yeah. I actually spoke to Delfio about 2 days before his passing, and we were talking about World Party and just the buoyancy of New Orleans. And, you know, there's a lot of parallelisms to Kansas City, and it was a great conversation. I remember that clearly myself. What do you like best about being a musician?
Well, there are two things. The number one thing that I love is actually playing music with other people. It doesn't have to be my music. It could be somebody else's music. It could even just be playing in a horn line, backing up a wedding band. You know, as long as I'm with my horn in my hands, with other people, doing that, you know, everything is good. I mean, I just I love the act of playing my instrument with other people. And then also I really love practicing. I mean, I don't, you know, maybe it's not the most glamorous part of being a musician, but I tend to be a rather anxious sort of guy and kind of stressy, and practicing really has kind of a soothing, meditative effect on me. It kind of helps me center, and you know, being able to do that, not to as great an extent as I would like, but, you know, to some extent at all, has sort of really helped me keep it together during this time. So, I mean, I guess I would say I just love playing music, and I love, I love practicing, and I also love the hang, you know. I love going to Smalls and seeing a lot of friends and really being inspired by other cats, and, you know, I like traveling and running into musicians at the airport, you know, randomly. This is a crazy story. Last May, I was in Europe. I did a short tour promoting my last album, and I had one day in Paris, and I randomly decided I would go to Ile-de-France and to check out the Sainte-Chapelle, just to do touristy stuff, because, you know, when you're traveling for music, often you don't have that much opportunity to do touristy stuff. And as I was coming out of the subway, I randomly, like, coming into the subway at the same time was the great bass player Joe Sanders, who I used to play with a lot when he lived in America, and I hadn't seen in forever. And he just happened to be coming into the subway at the same time. The one time that I had been in Paris, like, in the past several years. I just love chance encounters with friends and colleagues like that. It's really cool.
Serendipity, man.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're going to come out of this, it will happen. And my question is, when we do come out of this and we all get back into the audience and the musicians get back on stage, what revelations do you hope we have during this absence of live music?
Well, I can tell you one revelation that I've had for sure is that I've taken the scene here in New York for granted, which is an easy thing to do when you've got young children and multiple teaching jobs and gigs and this and that, and you live pretty far out. I mean, it takes me on the subway an hour and a half to get into Manhattan. But, you know, not having the option of just going to the Vanguard or the Standard or the Jazz Gallery or Smalls and just hang there and soak up this amazing culture that we have in this music, in this city specifically, it has really hit me hard. Like, I can't think of the number of times I was like, man, I really want to go hear such and so, but you know, I got to get up at 6 for the kids tomorrow. Then I have a full 10-hour day of teaching after that. And it's just, I'm just going to be so exhausted. I'm getting old. And now I wish, like, every time that I thought that, I wish that I had just sucked it up and gone, because it's gone now and I can't do it. And I hope that when it comes back, and I'm confident it will come back, that me and others like me don't lose, in future generations, don't lose track of like how special this thing is and this place where we all are, not all of us obviously, but where a lot of us are, is, and the opportunities to be around each other and to soak up all the creativity. So I hope that's what comes back.
You know, I've thought a lot about how I've ingested live music. I got married last July, and my wife, we've been together for years. But thank you. I'm glad it was last July. I've taken her to a lot of jazz shows. She hasn't been to this many, and the irony and the weird thing about this is that the most unique show that I've taken her to was on March 3rd. We went to see Bill Frisell at the local Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, and I had a hard time trying to explain to her what the show was going to be like. It was just, he's one of those guys that you just can't pinpoint. He had his trio, as Petra was singing, and about 3/4 of the way through, she started singing "We Shall Overcome" and stood up, and it was almost like cerebrally the whole crowd knew what was coming, and the crowd just like in unison and in weird little pockets started standing up, and we all swayed as a group and sang "We Shall Overcome." And I think about that now, and I actually took a picture of her standing there and framed it for my wife on Mother's Day so she could remember like the old world last jazz act. I know it's bittersweet, but it was such a profound moment. And she was in tears several times during that show because it was so well done. And I think I always have been very cognizant of sitting down at shows during that minute before they get on stage and just taking a breath in and saying, man, this is amazing, because I get to go see a lot of shows and cover them. And I'm always thankful that that's a reality that I get to look into.
Yeah,
anyway.
And you know what, I do want to add also that I have found it inspiring to watch and hear my peers of my age group really develop and come of age in the past few years. Being able to hear people that I went to school with, you know, at the Vanguard as leaders. I mean, the first time one of my good friends played at the Vanguard, I was like, "This is amazing," and you know, that is something that I miss. Being proud of the community and that I'm a part of, and being proud of our generation that has come up. And you know, I hope that next generations also get opportunities too, and that this thing just doesn't just completely collapse.
Without a doubt. So my final question to you is this. Everyone has a perception of their version of who they think you are, your family, your friends, and your fans. But you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Who am I? I'm sort of a geeky, anxious dad type, and who, you know, I guess my personality is sort of somewhat defined by having had ADHD my whole life, and that has been a factor in my art and in my development. And so I'm this sort of quirky, somewhat nerdy guy who, you know, I'm not really good at hiding who I am or disguising who I am. I'm always me, and I guess that's how I see myself. music is a big part of me. It's something I do, but it's not my whole complete self. It's more of a reflection of that. And if you like my music, if you like me, if you like my music, you probably will like me. And if you don't like me, you probably won't like my music. It's just a quirky dude trying to figure things out, I think.
Right on. I like it, man. Hey, thank you, Patrick, for taking some time out today to talk with me on
my
Jazz.
pleasure.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Patrick for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.